When I did my 737th review here on the channel, I missed out on the opportunity to review a 737, and I did hear your feedback, so I thought, well, let's not repeat this mistake for the 747th review. So I've done an all-nighter to make sure that we can take a look at a 747, and we can do so also thanks to Tim, aka HDI International Airport, who has very kindly borrowed me this aircraft model. You can find a link to him in the video description below. And so with that, hello and welcome to a new episode of Review, where we today will take a closer look at a Boeing 747-200F of Atlas Air. At the front of the box we have a lovely image of the aircraft in real life, and on top of that we have the Atlas Air branding. And since this aircraft model is not coming from Harper Wings, we don't have any of the usual nonsense and ugly box design from Harper, but we get the image once more on the backside and a little bit of product information. And here she is, the Boeing 747-200F in the, I believe, still current standard livery of the airline. Now, this airframe started its life in December 1980 with Alitalia, before it then in 2000 moved over to Atlas Air, where it, however, in 2011 went into storage and since then has been scrapped. The fact that it started its life with Alitalia as a passenger aircraft is of course important, because it means it is a converted freighter, and therefore there are some specific details that we need to look out for, but we will of course take a look at all of the details throughout this review. But we start our tour around the aircraft model with a look at the tail section, where we on the vertical stabilizer have the Atlas Air branding. We should also quickly mention the bit of detailing we find on the horizontal stabilizer before we move on to the fuselage. Here on the side we find the flag of the United States of America, the full registration code of the aircraft and the aircraft type specification. And then we of course find the main cargo hatch to this aircraft that, of course, since it is a converted freighter, has been added after the aircraft was constructed. That means they had to cut into the fuselage, and therefore you find these lines above and underneath the cargo hatch. Those are reinforcements into the fuselage, and also a feature to lead away water from the hatch. And then also towards the very tail of the aircraft we find a bit of actually physical detailing around the APU exhaust. Now, if we move to the front of the aircraft, we can see across the fuselage a bunch of cabin windows, some activated, some deactivated. That is, of course, again, because the aircraft did start its life as a passenger aircraft. Then we also find the writing or branding of Atlas Air. We find a plethora of small details like static ports or hatches, so that's quite nice. We do also, of course, when we then look around the cockpit section, find the cockpit windows with the silver edge around that. We have the window wipers, again, some smaller details around the cockpit windows, and above them we do find the emergency hatch printed on as well, also with quite a bit of detailing, in fact. What I also quite like is just in general the shape here of the 747. The mold around the cockpit section is really excellent in my opinion. Then we can move on to the engine nacelles. They have been kept in this dark blue of the Atlas Air branding. Unfortunately, we don't really have any safety markings or any hatches here, but we do have the silver leading edge printed on at least that. The physical detailing itself is also quite alright, although when we look into the engines from the front we can see the engine fan blades, but I think this should be a darker grey tone. Above the wings we find the emergency exits have been added, and that leads us straight to the wings, which we should also take a closer look at. Here we do find the different flap slats and spoilers carved out, however a little bit drowned away by the grey base paint, but we do have different shades of grey for additional detailing. The underside of the wings has more nice physical detailing. I think that looks quite lovely. And of course the 747-200 also has this quite interesting feature with these kind of pillars here at the end of the wing. If my memory serves me right, these are actually antennas meant for radio communication. Another highlight here worth mentioning is of course that we do also have landing lights printed on. The landing gear is made entirely out of metal, except of course for the wheels themselves. They're made out of plastic, but this is the landing gear that Big Bird used on all their 747s. In fact, every manufacturer back in the day except for Harper Wings used this exact landing gear, which has a weird feature with the main landing gear where the inner pairs aren't entirely fixed. I mean, they're slightly loose. They won't come off, but they're just wobbly for whatever reason. What I of course especially like is the fact that we do have printed details at the front landing gear, and we can find even more printed details on the belly of the aircraft. Here we however also have a hole in the fuselage, but as the model was released back in 2003, I don't really know if it came with a stand, but if it didn't, then it's certainly a silly decision. And then finally, and last but certainly not least, we do also have the remaining doors to the cargo compartments printed on here at the back of the aircraft, and also here at the front of the aircraft. So there we have it, the Boeing 747-200F in the current standard livery of Atlas Air from Big Bird in scale 1:500. And what can we say about this aircraft model? Yes, it is an old aircraft model. As I said, it was released back in 2003, and yet it beats any current day Harper Wings release. The only place where I would say a Harper current day release is a little bit ahead of this aircraft model is with the engines, where we have the engine fan blades that are in a very metallic color, which should be darker, and the fact that we don't have any safety markings on the engines. But apart from that, honestly speaking, this aircraft model still wipes the floor with anything that Harper comes up with these days. And that despite the fact that the aircraft model is so old, which does show in some places, like for example how they have added the wings. And now of course current day releases from Harper Wings, you get the wings slotted in from the side, which leaves much less of a gap than what we see on this aircraft model, where you have basically the wings in one solid piece, which is then put in underneath into the fuselage. But when we then, for example, look on top of the fuselage, sure, the model does not come with antennas in scale 500, that is very unusual, but they added it as a printed detail, something we even to this day don't get as a standard from Harper. Now, it's of course not a revelation that a 21-year-old model beats what Harper is giving us nowadays, but it's just funny every now and then to get a reminder of, well, how much they are ripping us off when we look at these old models from Big Bird, from Net Models, and what they all were called back in the day. And there are surprisingly many of these kind of models on the market. Maybe not this specific one, but overall there are many great old scale 500 models. So if you are looking for a good scale 500 model, buy them used. Buy non-Harper models. That's my top recommendation for this review. With that, we have reached the end of today's episode. If you have enjoyed this video, then don't forget to leave a like. If you are new around here, why not hit subscribe? That would be absolutely awesome. With that, thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you soon again. I'm checking out, and bye.